Welcome to the show. We might want to close that thing a little bit. Welcome to the show here, SportsStreamNetwork.com, Jeff DeForest, and welcome to our new time. I'm looking at a couple of bozos that helped us put this together, Jory and Todd, and they do a tremendous job. I just came off a fiasco. If you guys want to catch me, follow my radio show. It's iHeartRadio, and it's a phone application, much like SportsStreamNetwork.com is. You guys can catch our 4-hour early morning show, 6 to 10 Eastern Time, but today it was a fiasco. And you just never know if you're getting a subtle message from management when they're trying to just drive you out. Sometimes, in the old days of radio, they would take a guy that was doing morning drive and then maybe put him on overnights, driving the police van. We were tracking criminal elements all over bad neighborhoods in the middle of the night with no assistance. You're pulling up in a news van. What's the first thing that's going to get ransacked? It's going to be the news van of a radio station. And that was their subtle way of implying to you that maybe it might be good to consider moving on. I'm not sure what the message is here, but if you'd like to catch us, pretty tough to do 4 hours of radio when you have no ability to take a telephone call or put a guest on, and you're sitting in there by yourself. So I'm well practiced for this hour here on SportsStreamNetwork.com, that's for sure, without my usual buddy partner in crime. And I think there are going to be others that get involved. I keep getting inquiries as the show continues to go, hey, man, I want to be on that show, man. I could do what that guy does. But we're very loyal here at SportsStreamNetwork.com, and Jersey Kyle's scheduled to be back with us on Thursday. And if you're riding waves on the Jersey Shore, Kyle, it's good to see you. Jory tells me that you hooked up with the Fudge Man. Maybe we ought to put that another way. That you hooked up with the good people from Steele's Fudge on the Jersey Shore. They've been dominating the Jersey Shore, just slaughtering the competition. There is no other candy. Everything else looks like a Clark bar compared to what Steele's Fudge is offering in terms of fudge. And apparently they've made the connection, and there are rumors adrift that Kyle has accepted some payola. I'm not sure where that is with the SEC and all the different things that Jory's trying to do. Usually files a ton of paperwork. You can't even call this guy on the phone without filing 16 pieces of paper with the SEC. That's how on the level this whole thing is with SportsStreamNetwork.com. So if you'd care to invest, you can either send the check directly to Jory or maybe send it to me, and we'll be happy to entertain those donating dollars. But long morning, and a lot of it spent, many different directions that we went in this morning. Now, I'm broadcasting here from South Florida, Lighthouse Point, Florida, and of course been following the Dolphins professionally for over 30 years, 33 years I believe it is. I keep going by, and my, you know how you always have some landmark date that stands out. It's tough to figure because I thought I came here in the summer of '81, but I believe it was 1982 because the first big sporting event I covered here, as I've mentioned before here on the show, was Alexis Arguello and Aaron Pryor. And as much of a boxing fan as I was, I didn't know a hell of a lot about Aaron Pryor. He was a fighter out of Cincinnati, had an outstanding record, all kinds of versatility. But I'm thinking this is the great Alexis Arguello, one of the most revered champions of all time out of Nicaragua. Devastating knockout puncher. You'll remember, and for your sports buffs, is a great trivia question. Alexis Arguello, who campaigned essentially as a lightweight at 135 pounds, eventually on national TV made his transition into the 140-pound junior welterweight or super lightweight division. Who did he knock out in his first fight at 140 pounds? A great question, and it has historical boxing significance because it turns out it was the guy who was training Mike Tyson through the early stages of his big run when he was knocking out another stiff every week on TV. It was a guy named Kevin Rooney, who was a disciple of Cus D'Amato, as is Teddy Atlas, who now I think Teddy's, eating a few too many of those magic mushrooms because his last performance on TV was about as bizarre as any boxing color analyst I've ever seen. And then it's funny, too, because you're out there using all kinds of extraneous means of describing what's going on in the fight, and then they miss the key elements. Meanwhile, the guy's being counted out 6, 7, and they miss the whole thing because they're too busy doing shtick. So, I don't know. I used to really like Teddy Atlas as an analyst. I think he's great talking about the game, but this last performance, they're really trying to step it up on that Premier Boxing Champions Tour. You can't figure out what channel it's on, which is one of the rough parts, but they are at least staging some competitive fights there. That being said, Rooney was a sick, degenerate gambler also. So I remember being out in Las Vegas for a couple of Tyson fights, and then other fights where Kevin Rooney was involved. And you would see him at the dice table, and he was using chips, a color of which could not determine what the denomination was. And he'd be out there gambling till 5, 6 in the morning the night before a fight, then get in a corner. And he didn't have to do much when he was the corner man for Mike Tyson and the coach of Mike Tyson, because let's face it, Tyson was largely fighting stiffs, and they weren't going to last more than 30 seconds with the guy anyway. But yeah, Kevin Rooney was the guy that Alexis Arguello knocked down his first appearance at 140 pounds, and that would probably be the lasting image of his boxing significance if he wasn't the guy that was training the great Mike Tyson. He had a couple of other guys also, but then faded into, as Mike Tyson would say, Bolivian, and never really publicly surfaced again. Long since gone. But I remember Arguello, and he walked into a gym in Los Angeles where I was hanging around because I was covering a sport there. In L.A., this is circa late 70s, early 80s. Had to be very early 80s since I believe I moved to Florida in 81, but now realize it had to be 82 because that was the date, November 82, of Arguello and Pryor, and they were fighting at the fabled old Orange Bowl here in South Florida. Drew a tremendous crowd. I had some great seats for that fight, and I think if you go back and you look that one up on YouTube, you'll see a young DeFo sitting there ringside about the second row, and behind me, like sitting behind me with worse seats, is Dustin Hoffman, who was red hot at the time, right? I mean, might have been just coming off The Graduate and some of his other big movies, and he had worse seats than I did for this fight.
That's the fight where
Arguello went down.
Where Pryor...
we used
the
Panama Lewis stuff, yeah, which is great. I mean, it leads us right into our main topic here of the opening segment of the show, which is the mystery here that still is surrounding Deflategate. It's been an oddball off-season for the National Football League. They had that thing with Greg Hardy where they were going to suspend him. Here's the harsh punishment we're going to hand down. And they were going to suspend him for 10 games, and then some arbitrator turns around and says, nah, make it 4. And people are screaming, they're hollering, they're saying, hey, wait a minute, you got a 4-game suspension for a guy who beat the crap out of his girlfriend, and this is supposed to be a big cause célèbre for the people in the National Football League. Now, we're not going to tolerate these type of people in our league. And you'd have to think that some of these sponsors that they have, Mercedes-Benz can't be happy going ahead and anteing up a ton of capital, and they're having wife beaters and spousal abusers and alcoholics and guys that have killed people. Not exactly the kind of stuff that you want to associate with that Smith-Barney type of crowd. I say, old chap, are you making money right now? And then the guy would come back and say, Smith-Barney, where we at? I don't remember the exact phraseology, but you can't imagine that that's a favorable association for the National Football League to have all of these criminals out there and people that are abusing women. And so they wanted to clean up that image, but then the natural equation was, hey, wait a minute, people are screaming. 4 games for a guy that dragged his woman down a flight of stairs, beat her to a pulp, threatened her with guns, had a bigger arsenal than the ISIS people do. And then you turn around and you're going to give Tom Brady 4 games of a suspension for something that seemed pretty innocuous and easily could have been explained away, as we've said many times here on the show. I mean, if Brady just steps up after that ball game against the Indianapolis Colts and says, you know what, this was really stupid, it was all a big mistake, I told the guy to let a little bit of air out of the football, he might have gone a little bit too far, I don't know, we're not sure, we don't have any measurement device to tell us what the pounds per square inch is, but I'll go ahead and accept full responsibility for this. And I think the thing dies right there on the vine. But instead, he comes up with this elaborate scheme. He doesn't know anybody. It's my old what woman theory, and I think a couple of guys in the room can relate to this because in marriages, I'm 0 for 2 with a walk, and I don't know how Todd is doing. Jory doesn't speak too much about his social life. He just always has pictures of hot young women that he carries around at all times. But, I mean, if you look at it, it seemed like, it was just much ado about nothing. And then Brady, in denying it, it's like I said, it's the what woman theory, where you get caught red-handed. You're in the bedroom, your wife or your girlfriend comes in, you're flat out stark naked with another voluptuous babe on top of you, and she gets all embarrassed and starts to put some clothes on. And the one question that no man can actually answer with any kind of objectivity or in any sincerity is, who's she? When a woman asks you, who's she, what's your answer, guys? You got no idea. There's nothing you can say. Oh, you say she's nobody. Oh, yeah? Then what's she doing here? But the ultimate denial would be, you're caught red-handed having sex with another woman. She kind of leans her way into the closet. And the woman that you're with or were with at the time, she's soon going to be meeting a very pricey attorney, and that's going to come at your expense. She says, who's she? And you say, what do you mean? Woman? What woman? I don't see any woman in here. That's all you can do, right, is pretend that she's delusional. Maybe we should have your head checked, because you're obviously seeing things. There's no woman here in this room. And that's kind of the approach that Brady was taking. I mean, he's asking you to believe something that is completely preposterous. So, that being said, though, as you look at the whole circumstances and the way it's played out, and I guess, is it tomorrow? Today's what, August 11th, I want to say? August 11th, because I have some tickets that I threw out in the garbage that I saw outside, still sitting there from yesterday's racing activity, which I don't know about you guys, but after I left here doing a show, which we've now switched the time from 4:30 to 11, nothing went right. And it was that way all day long. Absolutely nothing went right. I went to the track, lost 4 photos by the narrowest of margins. We're talking about nose hairs, people. You could have shaved off the margin with a razor blade. That's how tight it was. I lose all 4 and get bludgeoned at a local simulcasting place. And then I figure, well, let me go play my game, which is my latest addiction. I wouldn't say it's the latest addiction, but it's an ongoing addiction, a burgeoning addiction to video poker. Where the machines, I don't care where they are, I don't care how scantily they pay off. They could be owned by some Indian tribe that's only operating on the outskirts of Omaha, Nebraska, and are operating under no gaming regulations whatsoever. They could be the machines on one of those 3-hour cruises to nowhere. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that around the country, but that was a big thing that was happening here in Florida for a long time. Come on to Palm Beach Princess and have a ball. And you know how it is, they show the hot babes around the dice table and they're all celebrating. But when you go on the ship, let's face it, everybody's completely depressed. They're all losing their ass. They go to the ATM machine on the ship, and I don't know, it would be a lot easier to just get some money off a loan shark before you jumped on board. Because just to get your own money, they're charging you like 10 points worth of juice. You're picking up $200. Yeah, that's $20. What are you going to do? Try and jump in the water, swim back to shore, and go to a bank? You can't do it. So you're a captive audience, and it happens from time to time, but operating under no regulation whatsoever. That being said, I feel perfectly comfortable sending in any amount of money through these machines, because you're thinking, with video poker, at least you have a shot. It's not some arbitrary thing that's set at 90% payback or 85, or I would imagine certain Indian casinos that you guys have experienced. Not to say anything negative about the Indians. I'm very much in favor of the change name proposition for the Redskins. They shouldn't be the Redskins, right? I mean, it's kind of insulting. That's like calling, if the Jets changed their name to the New York Jews, people would be upset about it, would they not? I'm Jewish, and I still would find it like a little bit odd, wouldn't it? Hey, how the Jews doing today? It'll be rough. So we'll see what happens with that. Bad year for the NFL. They've managed to skirt by this because they put so much attention on Deflategate that nobody's even talking about the Redskins. They could call them anything. They could call them the Savages, and nobody would know because they've gotten so much attention diverted to this whole business about Tom Brady. So that's coming down tomorrow. I would imagine it doesn't get resolved tomorrow. I don't have any particular inside information to this, but you can't but help but think this, that this guy Jim Turner, who was an offensive line coach with the Miami Dolphins a couple of years ago, and he was involved in one of the other scandals that they endured, which was Richie Incognito, who ironically is back in the league with the Buffalo Bills with Rex Ryan of all people. Rexy, sexy Rexy, thinks he can keep him under control. It's possible Incognito, I don't know. I'm not a believer that people have, habitual things that immediately turn around just because they've incurred some punishment. If you believe that, they would have let Manson out of prison a long time ago when he was going insane at some of those parole hearings. But I don't imagine that this hearing with the commissioner tomorrow with Tom Brady in front of a federal arbitrator is going to be much different than those Manson parole hearings, where you're just hoping one of the people on the parole board doesn't accidentally fall asleep and hit, okay, parole approved. Let this maniac back out on the streets. The Ted Wells report being questioned by this guy Jim Turner, who was involved in the Richie Incognito thing, and he was the offensive line coach that supposedly knew all of this stuff was going on in the Dolphins locker room. if you don't remember the story, it got so big. I mean, it was an embarrassment for the franchise because the last thing you want to see is one of your slug journeyman offensive linemen in a giant picture behind the set of the Oprah Winfrey Show. And she's talking about your team in derogatory terms. There they are on The View. Barbara Walters is saying, those Dolphins really need to get it together. It's like, okay, Barbara, why don't you work on the lisp a little bit, and we'll go on and listen to you, watch you on another day. 100-year-old Barbara Walters is condemning the Miami Dolphins. How do you think their owner, Stephen Ross, feels? So they cleaned that up. But Jim Turner was one of the people that unfortunately fell victim to the fallout, where I don't know what he had to do with it. Can he really control everything that Richie Incognito does? You would have thought maybe one of the team leaders, if there were such things on that Miami Dolphins squad, would have stepped forward and said, hey, listen, Richie, you're going too far. This Jonathan Martin, he can't take it. He's not equipped to take your ribbing and all of the things that you're saying about him and all of the insults you're slinging and the fact that you're texting him that you're going to bang his sister and, then go over to your his mother's house and take care of her too. But really a little out of line and out of whack for a while and certainly not worthy of the dignity level of people that are playing professional football. But unfortunately, the portrayal was that this was more likely the norm than the exception. And Jim Turner ended up being one of those guys that took a fall. Not the old kicker from the Jets. Remember that guy? He might have been the last straight-on kicker that we saw, with apologies to Pete Gogolak. But remember when the soccer style came in, I think Jim Turner, he was maybe the last guy in the National Football League. It was the AFL at the time. Kicking for the Jets, he was a dead-on, straight-on kicker. Blanda was that also, George Blanda, who kicked from, I think, 1930 all the way through 2012 before he checked out. He was on his deathbed and he was still making field goals, this guy. He was that good. Played a little quarterback, too, for the Oakland Raiders. Saved the money at the position. Yes, Mr. George.
On that note,
yes.
When we had our office up in the IBM building, right, I call Aflac to have an Aflac representative come out to get everybody Aflac.
Right.
And in walks the representative, and guess who it is? Ray Guy.
Ray Guy. Okay. Hey, one of the greats, right? People thought the Raiders were crazy when he was selected in the first round of the draft. Late in the first round, he thought, what, are you kidding me? A kicker? That never happens. A punter. But here he is. I believe the only punter, I would imagine that's true. Only punter, without even checking it out, that's in the Hall of Fame. The only punter ever to make it to the Hall of Fame. But this whole thing has gotten out of hand, and the Ted Wells report is still a very curious thing. In both the Richie Incognito incident, which this guy Jim Turner claims has cost him his entire career. He can't buy a job. This guy can't even get a job asking people if they would like their French fries supersized at a Burger King. Then nobody will touch him because he was involved in this whole thing with Richie Incognito and the insulting of the Asian trainer who was working. He was an assistant trainer with the Miami Dolphins. And so Incognito's back in the league, no problem, and he probably have a pretty prominent role there, playing for Rex Ryan. I believe the other guys that were involved in it, Jonathan Martin came back and played, and yet this guy Jim Turner, who was the coach, who probably was there sort of baffled as to what to do about the situation, he's in a position where he's just out of work, and he's filed a rather expensive lawsuit against the National Football League, and I don't know what the odds are of him winning, but the essence of it is that this Ted Wells, who's the investigator for the NFL and obviously became very prominent, a huge figure in the Brady investigation and Deflategate investigation, that he defamed the character of this assistant coach from the Finns and should be held liable for it. I don't know if Brady's going to make a case like that. I would imagine if he somehow gets some compromise on this suspension that he's willing to accept, it just goes away and we don't hear about it too much anymore. He's too busy trying to cover up the opposite thing, which was Inflategate, which resulted when his wife, the beautiful Brazilian model Gisele Bündchen, was found wearing a burqa as if she was on her way to some mosque somewhere. And the truth was she was going to a very fancy schmancy Parisian plastic surgery place and was getting a little work done, let's say, and that was while she was in total denial of that. So she tries to go in there in disguise like a masked wrestler, comes out of there, gets completely exposed, so to speak, and you're trying to figure out which is the more prominent thing. Is it Inflategate with Giselle getting a little breast enhancement, or was it Deflategate with Tom Brady, perhaps the premier player right now in the National Football League, being involved in what was deemed to be a cheating scandal. So we'll see how that plays out. But meanwhile, a lot of people are jumping on Ted Wells. It does seem like this guy does some pretty shoddy investigations, doesn't it? There are a lot of assumptions being made in the conclusions of the Ted Wells report. And I can't think of a better way to make a living. This would be the greatest job that you could ever have, where you could be completely inept at what you do, be literally lambasted by virtually everybody, have only one man stand behind you, and that's Roger Goodell, and have almost everything that you do scrutinized to the point where people think you're just a blithering idiot. And you still managed to make, about $5 million a pop for these two investigations in billing hours, and then on top of that, you're going to come back and be the attorney for the NFL in any future endeavors that they get involved in. And you have to think, Brady's waiting for this, and so is Goodell. What's next? What will be the next big scandal to hit the National Football League? Kind of hard to figure it out. I was a little concerned, too, watching, we mentioned this on the show yesterday, a little concerned watching the Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. Is Marv Levy okay? He looks like he's about to check out, doesn't he? You ever seen that? Sometimes you go to a hospital and you're visiting somebody else who might even be slightly, getting close anyway to meeting their maker. They're gravely ill. But you go to their room, and they look a hell of a lot better than their roommate. And you're thinking, how is this person alive? We're watching Marv Levy, and it looks like he's ready to just have his head hit the floor at the Hall of Fame ceremonies. And then, I don't know if somebody gave him a little shot in the ribs there when Bill Polian, who was being inducted, who had been a general manager and worked with Marv Levy during those 4 big years where the Bills went to the Super Bowl, losing them all ultimately. But it looked like somebody jabbed Marv Levy in the rib cage and said, "Hey, Marv, he's talking about you." And then all of a sudden you saw the guy. There was a famous case here, and it's almost embarrassing to make this reference because it might be a sensitive topic. But there was a famous case here where there was a woman named Terry Schiavo who was officially brain dead. She had been declared brain dead. There was no chance of any revival, no chance of her snapping out of this coma she was in. And she was in this coma for like 12 years. And the family, after a reasonable period of time, had every right, in most people's opinion, to say, listen, this is ridiculous to try to sustain this woman at tremendous expense to everybody, and also emotional expense. She's not coming back. She's a complete vegetable. She may as well have had a lobotomy. They may as well shut off everything. And let's face it, after a while, just like you would do with a pet, beloved pet animal, you have to say, enough is enough already. We're not going to try to sustain this. This is going nowhere. But anyway, Terry Schiavo eventually became kind of a political cause celeb because Jeb Bush, now running for president, Jeb, who was the governor at the time, also was trying to make it seem like he was some kind of religious zealot, and he didn't want to alienate or piss off any of the people, the large, substantially very heavy right-wing Christian element that exists everywhere in Florida from Palm Beach on. You could kind of consider that the Mason-Dixon line, because once you get out of Palm Beach, you get north of Palm Beach, Florida, which is part of the three-county South Florida configuration with Dade and Broward County. Once you get past there, you may as well be an extra in Deliverance. I mean, it's Hillbilly City. And you start seeing the billboards there on the highway, if you take that dreadful long drive out of the state, where you're seeing a considerable influence of right-wing, God-fearing types that are against everything. They're against abortion, they're against this, they're against that, and they were very much against ending Terry Schiavo's life in a merciful and common-sense fashion by just pulling the plug on this respirator that was keeping her alive. And Bush was very influential in trying to keep that woman alive. And it became a very big political battle with the family, who logically wanted to go ahead and say, listen, the woman has a right to die. You would think if this is a right-to-work state, it would also be a right-to-die state. Because after all, most people come to Florida, it's God's waiting room. They come here ready to check out. That's the way it's been for a long, long time. Hey, Granny, how you doing? Not so good. Okay, I got the paperwork here on your will and trust, so we'll just polish that up a little bit and see if we can't make something happen with that. Levy didn't look any better than Terry Schiavo did in the final days of her, I guess what you could call her life, or her elongated comatose state. So I got a little scared for that when I was watching the Hall of Fame ceremonies. But they did roust him to the point where he was able to go ahead and pass off a smile. So, maybe things aren't looking great for this guy, but we wish him certainly all the best. Interesting. We'll see which way this whole thing goes with Jim Turner, the former Dolphins offensive line coach, who is now suing Ted Wells for the report that he did that he says was severely damaging to his character to the point of costing him his career. A bunch of other stuff going on. Floyd Mayweather popping off again, speaking of boxing. And he's got to be desperate, huh? I mean, they must have put it to him. Obviously, you made the big score. He's perfectly entitled to continue his career. There probably isn't anybody out there at $147 right now that poses a real legitimate threat. He's already beaten Miguel Cotto. Cotto supposedly was going to fight Canelo Alvarez, Saul Alvarez, the Cinnamon Alvarez from Tijuana, who was a young star there in Mexico, built up a huge record. He was fighting every other Tuesday for a while, built up a huge record for a guy his age, and then got a shot at Mayweather. They had to make that fight because the Mayweather fights were getting so boring. So they put him in there with Canelo. Huge success. Big money for Mayweather and for Canelo Alvarez as well. And Canelo did what a lot of guys do in front of Mayweather for some reason, almost inexplicable. They freeze. And he didn't do any of the things that he normally did. He didn't go in there with that typical Mexican fighter attitude that he's just going to be moving forward the entire time. And it doesn't matter. We know this now, that Floyd Mayweather Jr. couldn't break an egg with either hand, as the cliche goes in boxing. And he destroyed Alvarez. He just picked him apart. Canelo did not do anything really strong to give you consideration that he was of that level. And then he went back, fought a couple of stiffs, and now he's worked his way into a position where he's going to fight a legitimate guy in an aging Miguel Cotto. And maybe the winner of that goes in there against Mayweather again. But we've already seen that act. So there's not much left for Floyd Mayweather to do. And he has to be absolutely desperate to draw attention to this fight that he's got coming up on pay-per-view with Andre Berto, who you would have to think has no shot to beat Mayweather either. Unless somehow he lands a lucky haymaker. And even then, Berto, who had a lot of power early on in his career, hasn't been knocking anybody out in his last several fights. In fact, he sustained 3 losses in his last 5 fights, 2 of which happened to guys that Mayweather already easily handled. A very scared and frightened Victor Ortiz, who was kind of flaky to begin with. I think there might be some mental issues there. And also Robert the Ghost Guerrero, remember his father was popping off at Mayweather. You're a wife beater, a woman beater, we're going to make you pay for that. And all that happened was Guerrero was lucky to maybe win 2 rounds in that fight, and those were rounds where Mayweather was in his corner eating a cotton candy and just took a couple of shots to the body just to let this guy look like he was actually in it. And like all Mayweather fights now, it went the distance. Tough sell. So what Floyd has done, Money is the master marketer, and obviously has prospered greatly because of it. And he came out, and people are taking great exception with this, of his top 5 boxers of all time, which he put himself at number 1. That might be a stretch of the imagination now. Just based on his undefeated record, you could make that case. But the thing that got everybody's attention was he ranked Muhammad Ali 5th. And he ranked him 5th, I have the list here, behind himself. The great Roberto Duran, which you could make a case for. But Duran fought a long time also and sustained some inexplicable losses. Duran's problem was he looked like he swallowed a bowling ball in between fights. He would go from 135, where he was his strongest as a campaigner, and probably you could make a case he was the most dominant lightweight of all time, which is saying a lot when you go back into boxing history. But as he started to move up in weight, he wasn't nearly as effective. And I don't know that diminished people's opinion of him, but he did sustain some losses. And his biggest problem was he liked to eat. And he would go from 135, he'd walk around in the streets at about 215. And you wouldn't recognize him. Another guy had that same problem, Ricky Hatton. They called him Ricky Fat. And Ricky Hatton, who campaigned at about 140, 147, somewhere in there during his career, he'd be seen on TV in an interview like 3 months before the fight, and he weighed 260. And you're thinking, how the hell is this guy going to make weight? I don't know what he did. Maybe Vic Tanny or Weight Watchers, but pretty tough for those guys to get down there and have that happen all the time, where you're ballooning up constantly and then drawing yourself all the way down to 135. You would imagine after a while that type of thing would take its toll on you and compromise your career. So I don't know. I mean, I consider Duran a great fighter. Was he better than Muhammad Ali? Certainly wasn't bigger in terms of worldwide stature. And I think you also have to consider that it isn't like today, where the Klitschko's have dominated boxing for a long period of time. You're talking about an era where there were killers. There were only 8 champions altogether. There wasn't this split business with the World Boxing Council and the World Boxing Association, and then eventually the World Boxing Organization, the International Bribery Federation, the International Boxing Organization. They didn't have all this alphabet soup stuff going on back then. 1 champion, 8 weight classes, and there were a lot of guys that competed as heavyweights, and they had some skills. It wasn't like these were stiffs. This wasn't Klitschko's management team going to some graveyard in Germany, digging up a body there. Is it okay? We'll take this one here. Yes. Some guy that owned a museum. Yeah, Guggenheim. He's going to fight him. And they throw him in the ring. So when you consider the level of opposition that Ali was going against, it seemed disgraceful for Mayweather and disrespectful for him to rank the great Muhammad Ali behind guys like Sweet Pea Whitaker. It was great. Pernell Whitaker, good fighter, but I don't know that anybody thinks, let's see, top 5 all time, Pernell Whitaker, and then Muhammad Ali. Pretty rough to make that equation. So, well, we're looking at the level of desperation of Floyd Money Mayweather in trying to sell this fight, and who could blame him? Because you would have to think anybody that buys this, even the most diehard of boxing fans, even a guy like my man Jory over there behind the camera today, would be hard-pressed to not pull one of those usual Mayweather fight things where you go, hey, you buying the fight? And you're asking everybody if they're buying it because you're hoping somebody will say yes, be stupid enough to say yes, and have you get the, invite yourself over to their place. Nobody wants to pay for this garbage. I can't. What could they charge? $9.95. There's going to be one of those things like the Flex Seal commercial where they say, yeah, and you get not one Mayweather fight, but the next 5 for the low total of not $69.95, but we're going to mark that down to $39.95. The next 5 Mayweather fights, $39.95. And the only way to draw attention to this thing is start insulting people, and why not take a shot at the greatest of all time, the great Muhammad Ali. All right, we got lots more to go. This thing is flying by here. Be with you until 12 o'clock here on SportsStreamNetwork.com. A lot of exciting things in the works. I can feel it. I can feel it in my soul. I can feel it down to my toes here with these guys, because Jory is relentless. And he's one of those guys, you give him just the slightest opening, he's in there, and he's ready to pounce, right? You mentioned you don't even finish the word advertising. He's already got propositions out there and proposals all over town, and he's got the entire thing sold. This is good. And Todd, his dedication is also very impressive. I mean, schlepping kids all over the place, doing whatever he has to do to get the job done. I think this thing is going to grow very quickly, and you're going to see an exponential growth in SportsStreamNetwork.com. And it's not just going to be one clown spewing out nonsense about Floyd Money Mayweather, but maybe a worldwide enterprise that gets to be a heck of a lot of fun. And the other thing that we want to angle towards is picking winners, which we've been talking about a lot. We have a lot of fun when we're out at the horse track. I don't know that we don't devastate your bankroll like a lot of people do that would be considered in the tout game, but pretty strong opinion from a lot of people. We have a lot of good people during the football season, so you're going to want to pay attention right here on SportsStreamNetwork.com. I'm Jeff DeForest. We're going to come back and take you up until 12 o'clock today. Our new time slot working out very well. We thank you people for tuning in. Hope you'll continue to tell your friends about it and get them on board. We have a lot of exciting things planned. And we'll come back and talk some more sports with you in the second half of the show here on SportsStreamNetwork.com. disappointed.
Okay.
All right, ready? Hey, here we go. We're back. Be with you till 12 o'clock, our new time slot. I hope you guys are enjoying it. If you happen upon us by total accident, that's okay. Hope you found it to be a favorable one. And we do this every day, 11 to 12, right here on SportsStreamNetwork.com, an expanding enterprise under the auspices of the great Jory, who's been doing this for a long time. Started with Musician Stream. I don't know if he started there, but developed that into a major monster in terms of content and entertainment. And I like these guys. They're hardworking guys. So if you're inclined to get involved in this sort of thing, we welcome you, whether it's content participation or especially if you want to kick in several $1 million and help us retire. But anyway, good to be with you. We're willing to grow along with you, and we hope you'll tell your friends if you found this, you're sitting at work, you're trying to hide the fact that you were on a porn site when your boss came around to come over your shoulder, and you're thinking, let me switch this to anything, and it became SportsStreamNetwork.com. That's great. We're happy to have you on board. We talked a lot. I ended up, just morphing into a boxing conversation there, and I know we have some boxing fans. That's one of the nice things. I've been dealing with this my whole life. Unless you're actually on some televised boxing telecast, my experience with both radio and TV has usually been that the minute you open your mouth about boxing and thoroughbred racing, here comes the program director down the hall with a sledgehammer, ready to break the glass and just take you right off the air, because they figure the average guy that's out there that's a sports fan, their only interest is football. And I don't want to accept that. I refuse to believe that. I know outside of where we live, there's no interest here in Major League Baseball, because the Miami Marlins, and we were trying to figure this out today on our radio show, which, as I mentioned at the top, you can catch around the country. It's not just unique here to South Florida on iHeartRadio.com, but this has been plaguing me for a while, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it is, and maybe whatever city you happen to be watching this in, if it's outside of South Florida. And Jory tells me we have, those 40 guys that are incarcerated in Alabama. They're stuck on SportsStreamNetwork.com. We had some steam coming out of New Jersey. That might be Jersey Kyle, who's watching the show right now while he's languishing on the beaches there at the Jersey Shore and riding the waves as if he was the big kahuna with a straw hat and a pineapple on his head, and was riding around in somewhere outside of Hawaii.
Jersey is number one. Florida's number two.
Jersey, number one state. All right, with like 8 guys, which is fantastic. But it'll grow. It'll grow over time. But maybe you don't have this, or it's possible that you believe this is true. Let me think. New Jersey, the Devils have won a couple of Stanley Cups in the not-too-distant past. The Jets were in a couple of AFC title games not that long ago when Sexy Rexy was the man there and Mark Sanchez was chucking a rock. Hey, Mark, don't throw the ball. Boy, he was an interception waiting to happen. How is he? It's not possible that he beats out Sam Bradford for the Eagles job. Possible, I guess. Anything is possible because that madman Chip Kelly is running the show there. He may just do it to prove a point. Put a lousy quarterback in there to prove that he's the greatest offensive mind, a genius of the proportions that we haven't ever seen before in our lifetime. He may be thinking that by starting Sanchez, but I doubt he would have pulled the trigger on having Sam Bradford be his quarterback. I'm not sure that's going to work out so well either, because Bradford literally is an accident waiting to happen. No athlete likes to be labeled as fragile or injury prone. Bradford, I remember watching a game when he hurt his shoulder at Oklahoma, and you thought, that's not enough to knock him out forever. And they made him the number 1 overall pick, and if I'm not mistaken, he was the last guy to benefit from the lack of a structured rookie contract parameter where the rookies can only get paid a certain amount of money. He was the last guy to get that ridiculous money that they were paying the number 1 picks, and ended up getting, $60 million in guaranteed money signing as a number 1 pick. Now, you would have to say, relative to that he may be the biggest bust in the history of the NFL, because he really hasn't done too much. The Rams had him. They let him go now in a trade, and they end up parting ways with him, still probably owing him a substantial amount of cash, and he gets picked up by the Philadelphia Eagles. You had to assume that guy was going to end up being the number 1 guy, but we'll wait and see. Nobody can figure out what Chip Kelly is doing, and I'm not even sure that Chip knows what he's doing. But yeah, I mean, whatever city you happen to be in, you might think that your teams are operating under somewhat of a curse. It's possible. But I believe it to be true here, and I'm not sure what the source of that is. As if you look at the teams that compete in South Florida, you have the Marlins, who have been despised forever. People couldn't figure out how they managed to get this stadium funding approved by the city of Miami and Dade County. These are two bankrupt entities. Miami has no money whatsoever. They blew it a long time ago when they built a mass transit unit here. It's known as the Train to Nowhere. We call it the Metro Fail. It's actually called Metro Rail. And the only people that ride it are a couple of Hialeah cleaning ladies. Every now and then you'll see somebody getting on at the stop in Hialeah if you're going out there to the casino. And you see a couple of cleaning ladies get on. They take it all the way. They go the distance. They go right into downtown Miami. They spent about $80 billion on that a long time ago. And I think everything went into the tank from there. So this was not a city that was flush with cash. Most municipalities, when they get involved in any kind of stadium project, it's an outright disaster. They have the beautiful little plan that they have about the surrounding neighborhood, and they tell you, oh yeah, and whether it's LA, you're going to hear this in Compton, right? Oh, we're going to beautify the neighborhood here. It's going to be absolutely palatial, and the poor people that are here and they don't have jobs and they don't have housing, they're all going to be living great lives. They're going to be living like DiCaprio. They'll all own yachts in a couple of years. And what usually happens, it happened here. They built the American Airlines Arena, and before that the Miami Arena for the Miami Heat. And both with big, enterprising promises that, oh yeah, the neighborhood here, which is kind of decrepit. Let's face it, you don't really want to, you don't feel that comfortable walking through on your way to the ballpark there if, you have to go a couple of blocks in the dark. There's no lighting there, nothing. You see a lot of dangerous things happen in that place. But they always tell you, yeah, this is going to be greatly reinvigorated with an infusion of cash. And then you get something like this. Some guy hammers up a basket on a boarded-up condemned house. And they go, see, we built you a park. So there was no greater controversy than A, the need to build a baseball stadium in South Florida, and B, the justification of the expense, because the team that was going to be playing there was owned and run by a couple of guys who people thought were running a baseball Ponzi scheme. So they built this stadium, and then during this off-season, the Marlins, who showed a little bit of promise last year, they started to come on a little bit. Seemed like there was a good vibe surrounding the team. A lot of good, young, talented players. They go in the off-season, and they make, by all standards, what appear to be very sound, solid baseball moves. If there is such a thing, they sign their young superstar home run hitter Giancarlo Stanton to a long-term deal where he's locked in here for at least 6 years, and he's going to make $325 million, a serious opening of the billfold to go ahead and suggest to the fans or imply to the fans that, yes, we're in this for the long haul. We want you guys to gravitate towards this team, and seemed like they made all the right moves. They acquired a guy, D. Gordon, from the Dodgers, who was lightening up for the first half of the season. Still kind of hanging in there in the chase for the batting title, but doesn't look like he's going to be able to sustain the phenomenal start that he had when he was off to a 400 start. And everybody was waiting for Jose Fernandez, young pitcher you guys are familiar with, a real stud of a pitcher, a great guy, terrific ambassador for the game. Great story, does all the right things. And when he's on the mound, the guy's a monster. He's right up there with Matt Harvey and some of the other guys that are talked about widely and respected around the league. So he unfortunately goes down with Tommy John, which again leads you to think you got one great commodity here, and he ends up, well, I think we're operating under a curse, and you're trying to figure out where is it coming from, at least with that team. Stanton, in the midst of an MVP season, gets hit in the face with a fastball last year, comes back from that, and then mysteriously injures himself again. I don't know if it was, he had a wrist injury without really taking a swing. You're thinking, can you get carpal tunnel from masturbation? I don't think so, but whatever it is that put him down, it was supposed to be a couple of weeks. Now it looks like it might be the whole season. It's just been devastating. They had a mysterious injury to another guy, Henderson Alvarez, who was one of their top pitchers, was number 2 behind Fernandez in the rotation a year ago. And this guy sustains an injury originally deemed to be nothing serious, and he's disappeared. I don't even know if he's in the country anymore. So you're thinking, well, that team's clearly operating under a curse, because if you look at the standings, nobody in their right mind could have ever anticipated that they would not just be in last place in the National League East, but in last place in all of baseball. So that's one part of it. Now you look at our other teams here in town, and you're thinking, how is this possible? Was it that the Dolphins at one point were considering letting Dan Marino go to another team? That can't be. Jory's a big Dolphin fan. How did they ever consider for 1 second that the great Dan Marino, this is a guy that holds every record here in South Florida. He lit it up for years, came in his rookie season. We beat the Bears when they were undefeated. Otherwise, they would have gone 17-0 and matched the 72 Dolphins. Our lone claim to fame, our lone distinction as a football franchise. Well, they had some good years, but you know what? We haven't done squat. It's been awful, and I think I originally thought that this was the curse of Marino, where you disgrace and disparage the reputation of a great player, excuse me, who's been on your squad for a long time. And, there's something in the occult. I believe in this. I think there are certain things that you can't really account for. What I'm thinking now, though, is, I don't know if you guys remember the great Ozzie Guillen, who was signed to manage this team by Jeffrey Loria. And you might have seen this on TV because Showtime was doing a deal where they were trying to kind of copy that 24/7 that HBO was having so much success with. The 24/7 started with boxing, actually with some of these Mayweather fights, I believe. May have even preceded Mayweather. Mayweather really made it big with his crazy antics and all of his cursing and all of the nonsense that goes on around him. The veritable flying circus that his family is. Is there a more dysfunctional family in sports than the Mayweather family? Probably not. The funny thing is, like the Addams family on TV, they have one normal guy. This guy, Jeff Mayweather, is one of the uncles of Floyd. And you would never know he was part of the Mayweather family. If he didn't introduce himself as, my name's Jeff Mayweather, you would swear there was no way. You would never be able to make the connection because he's kind of a normal guy. But don't know that there's a more dysfunctional family in all of sport than that. And yet, that being said, as you look at Ozzie Guillen and the Marlins and their relationship, comes in, Jeffrey Loria loves him, the owner of the team, loves this guy. Guillen gives a speech that is as inarticulate and as expletive-laden as anything Joe Pesci ever came up with in one of those mafia movies. Every other word is the F word. And Loria, after he finishes this, which would make you just absolutely horrified if you were employing this guy, says, "That's why you're the best, Ozzie. That's why you're the best." So it wasn't long before Ozzie lost favor. He, in Trumpian fashion, started spewing off things about how much he admired Fidel Castro. Not a great topic here in this area, which is infiltrated by many Cuban exiles and occupied by many Cuban... I don't know about occupied, that might not be... But they live here, is what I'm trying to say. And he makes some remark, and the next thing you know, he's in a jackpot. Team starts losing. Loria fires the guy. But we came to find out that he was an advocate of Santeria. So I'm thinking there's a dead chicken somewhere with a map of the city of Miami on it. And somehow, accidentally maybe, or I don't know if it was by design, Ozzie Guillen has actually placed a very serious and permanent curse on all of our teams. Because that's the only way you can explain the ineptitude of all of these ball clubs. The lone exception might be the Miami Heat, but even LeBron James, think about this. If you don't believe in curses or matters of the occult. Think about this. Even LeBron James, who loved dining at South Beach. There's Riley and Mickey Harrison, the president and owner of the team, Pat Riley and the great Mickey Harrison. They're at Table 7 over there, Prime 112, a very expensive joint there. I think it's $50 just to, get by the maitre d'. And, very pricey on the menu. They got all kinds of crazy things there. Kobe beef sliders are $300 a piece. And there's LeBron drinking whatever, the finest champagne. Send a bottle over there. He's loving it. You don't trade that in to go to Cleveland unless there's something of a more serious nature, a more surreal and unidentifiable nature that's in play there. And that's what he did. I think even that was part of the curse, although there is some rise for hope that the Heat as an organization have the people in play right now on their roster. They're counting on a lot of ifs, which is the key word in all of sport. If, giant IF at the top of the eye chart. They're counting on an awful lot of ifs to see if they can make it back to some level of prominence. I think, too, and look at it, if you think about it for a second, LeBron James with a bunch of absolute NBA bag ladies is there in the championship round and actually leading the Golden State Warriors, who all year long played like the Globetrotters, did they not? I mean, they may as well have had Marcus Haynes in their backcourt along with Steph Curry. and the people, Thompson, the people that they were employing there to bring the basketball up the floor. And yet even they struggle. I mean, that's how big of an influence LeBron James has on the game. And he had them in a 2-1 lead before they reverted back to being themselves. That whole Cinderella story blew up in smoke.
You saw that whole thing, right, on First Take, the whole about who would Michael Jordan.
Oh, yeah. Could he beat LeBron James in a one-on-one?
Right. And then they had the whole thing with Reggie Miller.
Yeah.
About if he had to take a 30-year-old LeBron or a 30-year-old Larry Bird, who would it be?
Who would it be? That's a good question. I mean, a 30-year-old LeBron certainly is a dominant player.
They went with Bird, though.
Yeah? I don't know that anybody could stop LeBron. Bird was a better shooter from the outside. Obviously,
much better free throw percentage.
Yeah, a more clever ball player. I'm not sure. You know what? I think LeBron is underrated for his overall floor game because people are so fascinated by all of the drama that seems to follow him everywhere he goes. His instincts for basketball are right up there with anybody, including also underrated. I don't know if you remember those great Portland teams that Bill Walton was on. I guess it was 1 year where they really had it going on and won the championship under the coaching tutelage of the great Jack Ramsey. But if you watched Walton's inside passing game out of the center position, I'm not sure anybody had greater instincts for the game. Right up there with Bird. LeBron James, I think, is in the same category. I don't know that you can dismiss his overall basketball acumen. And then who's going to stop him? I mean, that would be the thing. Can you guard LeBron James in a one-on-one ball game? It's hard to imagine that one guy would be capable of stopping this guy. Jordan says, he would lose to LeBron, and LeBron says he would lose to Jordan. Jordan being a better outside shooter might be the thing that gave him the edge, because obviously you're going to have to come out and protect against him just taking jumpers all day, and he hits a much higher percentage than LeBron James. And LeBron, while he's a better jump shooter than he was or thought to be coming out of high school, he's improved in that aspect, and he's improved his range. He still is suspect to and prone to getting into long slumps, where as the pressure mounts, not that he's capitulating and giving in, caving into the pressure because he's choking, but I think the fatigue factor gets into it. You need your legs to shoot long-range jumpers, and I think you saw a decline as the burden that he was carrying got to be more and more intense. His jump shooting ability fell off, and he was shooting like 33%. In the finals, even though he was getting 40 points a game. But that was about as Herculean an effort as you'll see one guy make and still fail. Allen Iverson had one of those deals when he was guiding the Philadelphia 76ers into the NBA Finals, where they ultimately lost. But the fact that Iverson at like 5'10", was listed at 6 feet his entire career, maybe 6'1"? He was hardly that, because I've stood next to him, and I'm not 6'1". And he was definitively shorter than I am. So to do what he did at about 5'10", 5'11", for as many years as he did, and take not a great 76er team to the NBA Finals, those are the kind of things that you look at and you say, my God, I mean, how could one guy be that much of a difference maker in basketball, and especially a guy that size? You could understand it with LeBron James. But who would win, Jory? I don't know. I would be inclined to think, certainly at this stage, LeBron could beat anybody, but Jordan in his prime was a tough guy to bet against doing anything. Another phenomenal, although he wasn't a great jump shooter, I mean, imagine trying to guard Dr. J in a one-on-one game. Or Jerry West, for that matter. I mean, if you go back to the old-timers, Elgin Baylor, some of these guys.
Hook up Kareem all afternoon.
Who's stopping Kareem, right? And he's probably going to grab every rebound off you. Shaq might be a difficult proposition, although essentially Shaq was a bricklayer. Anyway, it's been a lot of fun. Gone by a little bit too fast today for us here. I hope you guys like our new time slot if you were following the show. And if you weren't following the show and just discovered it today, we'll be back again tomorrow at 11 o'clock here on SportsStreamNetwork.com. These guys work really hard, and we're building quite an enterprise here, Jory would tell you. And I believe he's a man of his word. I think it's going to work out great. So thanks for watching. I'm Jeff DeForest, located here in South Florida. You can catch me tomorrow morning on iHeartRadio, and catch me again tomorrow morning right here at 11 o'clock. Be here 11 to 12 tomorrow on SportsStreamNetwork.com. I'd like to thank everybody who tuned in today. What'd you say? New Jersey, our leading state again?
Florida number 2, Jersey out in front.
All right, sounds good to me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. We're working on ways to get your feedback into the show, your comments into the show, maybe working telephone calls. So should be a heck of a lot of fun as we grow this thing from the ground up. SportsStreamNetwork.com. I'm Jeff DeForest. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock.